Welcome. Good morning. Everybody get enough sleep? No. You're the crowd that gets up early, though, right? Yeah. Well, thank you for getting up early and being here for our first panel for our 9th annual film festival here in Traverse City. We begin showing all our movies here this morning. And each morning we have these panels. And this morning we have a panel that is very much, the things we're going to talk about today are very much in the news. In fact, in the news right now as we await Bradley Manning's sentencing sometime this morning. So we'll talk a little bit about that and the other things going on and what these films represent and what they're trying to deal with. The thing that, the reason I want to do this panel, as I was telling them backstage, is that I'm very concerned about the withering away of our democracy. And as many have predicted over the years, the next wave of totalitarian thinking, fascism, whatever you want to call it, will not take place with some strongman taking over or some big event or whatever, but rather it's going to be and is the slow creep, the chipping away, bit by bit by bit. Just enough so you take away enough rights, but not too many, so that people notice. You have to have it still feel like, you know, it's really still the same. I don't care if they've got my phone number. I'm not doing anything illegal. And, and you do it in those increments. And then we reach the day where we realize it's gone. What happened? How'd this happen? And each of these filmmakers have made films that represent different aspects of that chipping away. And it's not just about NSA and the national security state and the abuse of this concept of homeland, fatherland security, but a whole bunch of things in terms of corporate control of our country, of our democracy, and how the Supreme Court a couple of years ago said it was okay for them, literally, to buy politicians and elections, and that was constitutional because these corporations are people. And but we, most Americans, I think, don't see the corporations as transformers. Transformers are not people, but they have the ability to actually cause a great deal of harm, all in the name of benefiting themselves. So I'm going to introduce the panel to you here, and then we're going to have a discussion, and then we're going to open it up to you. And I personally think this is probably the most important panel of the week as far as it affects our lives here, and something that we're all very concerned about. And I'm glad to see all of you here this morning to talk with us about this. To my right is a young man who came here from New Zealand this week. He's brought an excellent film called Propaganda. His name is Slavco Martinoff. And let's give him a round of applause.
Pleasure to be here.
Is it your mic work? Yep.
Hopefully it does.
Hey,
I was
yep.
saying thank you very much for calling me a young man still. For a chance to dream.
Younger than me. Let's put it that way.
I'll take anything I can get.
Our next guest and filmmaker made a really interesting film that on its surface you wouldn't necessarily, if you were looking in the program guide or what, you know, it's called Terms and Conditions May Apply. And he literally has made a film about that thing you click on all the time for when you buy an iTunes or Amazon or whatever, or movie, and you say, you have to click I agree to the terms and conditions. And you're thinking, okay, I remember when I watched it, Colin, and I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is going to be, you know, 90 minutes of watching paint dry. I mean, I already can't stand to read. I never read that long thing, right?
It's the best quote I've ever heard about the film.
Well, it was just it completely turned my head, and I thought, oh wow, this is like, we have no clue. Even the smallest thing, like buying a Elton John song or something. It's just like, just another way to just kind of snatch a bit of our humanity and our democracy and freedom from us. Anyways, please welcome Mr. Cullen Hoback.
Thank you.
Our next two filmmakers made a film a few years ago that was nominated for the Academy Awards for Best Documentary called Trouble the Water, and we had it here in Traverse City. About the Katrina hurricane in New Orleans, but really about so much more. And it, Tia Lesson and Carl Deal, I've known them for many years. Tia is probably, of all the people I work with, we go back the farthest of the whole crew that make our movies and things. And Tia started working on TV Nation back in the mid-'90s, and has been a producer of virtually all of my films since then. And a key element in terms of much of what you've seen on the screen was obtained or found or I won't say, well, I'll get into it later. Tia is the go-to person when nobody else can get the job done. You know, we bring in Ray Donovan, or Tia, you probably don't know that reference, it's a new show. But basically, somebody who is fearless and is not afraid to go and get the story. And so she's a dear friend, and I'm really happy to have her here today with her and Carl's film, which we'll talk about and what they've been through to get people so that you can see it. It's called Citizen Coke, referring to the Koch brothers. Tia Lesson. Carl Deal is also the co-director of Trouble the Water and Citizen Coke. Carl and Tia make these films together. Carl is I've worked with since what? Since Bowling for Columbine? Is that the first time? Yeah.
Bowling.
All right. What? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. What were you doing then? You were a reporter at CBS Radio, or what were you doing?
I was doing television news, network news.
He was working for Fox.
Were you really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
It was short-lived. One day I bumped into both Matt Drudge, Paulo Jones, and Rupert Murdoch at the revolving door, and then I realized what this was. I'm a lot smarter than that, but...
Right, and you were 19, sort of.
29.
Okay. Carl came on Bowling for Columbine as essentially an archivist, and you know, with documentaries, especially my films, it depends so much on finding the right footage, and so he took on that job, and on other films of mine also. Carl is the person when you see that footage, and you wonder how the hell did they get that. That's Carl Deal in my films, and it's everything from in Fahrenheit 9/11, the footage of Wolfowitz licking his comb and licking the other guy's comb. I don't know what there's doing a lot of licking. To that great footage of that nobody showed of Bush goofing around just before he announced we're bombing Baghdad, and in the minute leading up to it, and he's like, hey, you know, winking and, you know, as he's about to invade a country. It's just the most, I hope 100 years from now they show that footage and when they try to explain who the heck we were. But Carl is just a genius and a good soul and the person you want working with you. He is beloved by all. So please welcome Mr. Carl Deal. So we'll just go down and let each of you make an opening statement about the subject of why we're here today. And in fact, let's start with you, Slavco, because actually you had a difficult time getting here. Now he made a film called, well, I shouldn't say made a film called Propaganda. It's more like when you see it, he discovered essentially a North Korean propaganda film. And the shocking thing about this film, and it has all the things you'd expect out of well, you're very familiar with North Korean propaganda films, I'm sure. They play out at Carmike all the time. But the weird thing is, you're watching, you're just kind of like, whoa. But it's like everything in it, the facts in it are true. The things that they're saying are actually true if you were to fact check this film. Yet the package it's presented in is in the, the propaganda mode. Did I do an okay job with that? Is that a
Sufficient.
Sufficient for now. We don't want to give away too much.
I'm just, you're doing a good job of not giving away too much.
Yeah,
what
that's
I'm saying.
really
Yeah.
all I.
Because you don't want to.
No, that's
once
right.
you're in the theater and you're getting it, But it caused a lot of problems because, by association, I've ended up being taken into the counter-terrorism unit. This is back in New Zealand, following a phone call from the Korean government. They found out that I had a connection to this film, this North Korean film, and they accused me of North Korean collusion. When did I come across the film? Who did I talk to? Am I a communist sympathizer? And within the South Korean community in New Zealand where I live, I'm a communist and a spy, as were the people who worked on the film. And it's a real problem because it just kept spiraling, and then I ended up being red flagged with my government. So your spy agencies now spy on you, and they're connected to the South Korean government. Their NIS, which is their CIA, have flagged you as well. And the problem is, I came to America last month via a festival in Italy. It was for an interview in RT, Washington, and they held me for 6 hours trying to arrest me. And they're talking to the FBI, Homeland Security, and they don't want me there because of my association with the film. Even though you haven't done anything wrong. And in the end, they go, well, we can't arrest you because we can't find a way to arrest you. So we're just going to have you removed from the country. And I'm like, well, come on, this is going to make my life really difficult anytime I want to come back in here. And they're like, yeah. And so I'm like, well, gee, thanks. And they're like, yeah, where you go? And so I went back home to New Zealand, got your wonderful invitation to come here. I'm like, this is just...
After you've just been kicked out, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, here's the weird thing again. They kick you out, you have to kick you out. And but you said you had a really important interview in Washington. Yeah, I'm like, well, we'll let you back in. I'm like, what? Okay, so you parole me back in for a couple of days to do this interview. It was very nice, but very weird. And then I got your invitation, and you can get an appointment. We have to fly up to another city to do an interview at the US Consulate. And I asked for an appointment so I could make it in time to be here, and they're like, denied. No way. So I kept calling every day to see if someone missed out on their appointment, and I got in there and I flew up and I go in and you're in the American console and people lining up with their papers. I got all my papers, just beautiful, just right. How are you this morning, sir? It's going to be a good day. And everyone's lining up and everyone's being taken care of. There's coffee, tea, help yourselves. And then I get up there, I'm like, hi, how are you? How are you, sir? And I hand over my passport. Sit over there. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting used to this. I go and have my interview. He's asking me questions. Michael Moore, huh?
I'm hearing this for the first time, by the way. I don't know what comes next.
Film called Propaganda, huh? Sit over there. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good day. And on the day, you're told yes or denied. I don't get anything. You can just go. And so I go, I'm like, oh, God, this is terrible. I'm trying everything I can. And all the staff are being so wonderful, writing back and forth, going, we can get you this flight, that flight. I don't think I can get any flight. And then I see on the computer screen, because you track your number, and it goes, denied. My application's denied. Literally writing a visa, can I please go to this film festival? Courtesy of Michael Moore. It's a big deal. No, you can't go. And they literally call me up and go, tell us about your relationship with North Korea. Like, they know everything there is to know. It's in front of them. And I said, let's not do this, Like, I haven't been. You know that this film... They said no. So I said, right, I went to a journalist who works in our biggest newspaper, and he made a phone call to the American consul who said, oh, there's just been a misunderstanding. and I got a phone call 10 minutes later from the American consul himself going, "There's no problem here, it's just a computer glitch." And I'm like, no, I took a screenshot of the denied. He goes, "We're going to have our computers up and running at the end of the week." I'm like, I got to go to America, I don't understand what this is. He goes, "Well, you'll get your visa one day." I'm like, "God, why are you even calling me up? This is so weird." And he goes, "You know why." I'm like, "Okay, I'm glad we're being straight. Can I have my visa?" And he goes, "Yes." And I'm like, "What's going to happen to me when I get to the States?" "It's not going to be pretty." I said, "That's completely the truth." And so it was a very tense flight over yesterday. And I actually get there, and the only thing that saved me is just being LA. And they took me aside, and they take you in and do the interview, and they hold you. "Why are you here?" I've made a film, go to Michael Moore's festival. "Oh, a movie." Well, and they say the same thing, sinister, but in the nicest way. "Well, we just want to keep an eye on you. I'll catch your movie." Yeah, very nice, very sweet. Sorry if I've gone on a bit, but that's my experience with being watched. I'm watched.
Right. They know you're here in Traverse City.
Yeah. Sorry if that took a while. I'm getting used to it.
Well, we're glad you're here, and we're sorry you had
It's a real pleasure. Oh, not at all.
put up with this.
It's all exciting.
You're not the only one that has had to go through this sort of thing. I'm
yeah.
sure you know. The friends of ours, actually, he was here last year. One of our prizes made of 5 broken cameras, a Palestinian filmmaker.
Oh, I heard, yeah.
And he flies from Jordan to L.A. and he gets pulled aside at the L.A. airport, and they did not believe that he was an Oscar nominee. And he's trying to tell him, it says here that you're a farmer. And he says, "Yeah, I'm a farmer too." You're a farmer and an Oscar nominee. Like, do we Americans look stupid or what? So they held him for about an hour, him and his wife and his small child, until he was able to text me from inside the booth, "Help." So I called the Academy's lawyer, and they got on it. But yeah, it's made it very difficult. And it's difficult then, and other countries have reacted because, I think at Kennedy now, don't they eye scan, or they do something, to people who are not American. There's a lot of fingerprinting going on. There's like a whole apparatus that's set up to keep track of anybody that wants to come here. Colin, what gave you the idea for this film? Because it's such a small idea that says something huge about where we are and what we become. Maybe tell people a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, what gave me the idea originally wasn't even terms and conditions. I started out by just asking this idea of, how had technology changed us? What's the overall impact of technology? How's it changing our relationships, our friendships, how we develop? And I spent about a year working on that film. I interviewed maybe 20 people. I had an entire rough cut, and I just was totally dissatisfied. I didn't feel like I had gotten to the core of it. And it wasn't until I changed the name of the film to Terms and Conditions May Apply, which is really just a metaphor. It wasn't designed to be what the film was about. That then I went, oh my God, the answer's right in front of me. There's this, and I'd been working on the film for a year. I even changed the title of my film to this, and I still hadn't realized that the film was in fact going to be about the terms and conditions in a way. The terms and conditions really are just a window into a much larger problem. And this is something which is totally designed to be invisible. That's how I hadn't even seen it for that long. Because what we've got now is anything we do in our digital lives comes with this contract. And it's a legally binding contract. And that is a profound shift from where we were 20 years ago. I mean, you used to be able to read a book and you didn't have to sign a contract. You used to be able to watch TV and you didn't have to sign a contract. Now you use a Kindle, you're signing a contract. And that's why a couple years ago, they were able to pull 1984 of all books off of Kindles because they didn't have the right, And it's like, just because there wasn't smoke doesn't mean it didn't burn. And this is the reality we're living in now. And so I started looking in these contracts and saying, well, what are we actually giving up? And there's a lot that we're giving up. If you want to look at how we are moving closer and closer towards a totalitarian state, or at least the potentiality for that, it's all right there. There's a data grab happening in real time, and we're consenting to this. And it's, as you were saying before, Michael, it's a very slippery slope. There's someone in my film, he's this phenomenal hacker who really understands how these systems work. And, he says, it's like throwing a frog into a pot, a pot of water, and you slowly turn up the heat, and, the frog doesn't realize it's boiling. And that really is what the film is about. It's about how we've been turning up the heat on ourselves and whittling away at our privacy, bit by bit. In some ways in exchange for security after 9/11, in some ways in exchange for assumed convenience that comes with these technologies. So that's what the film is really about. It's sort of like my journey through this rabbit hole of things that just blew my mind one after another. And then I basically just wanted to take the audience on that journey, the same one that I went through.
It's really fascinating, and I think too, I learned that. I learned so many things I didn't know. That with some of these companies or whatever, like when you buy the book, you don't actually own the book. Amazon or Kindle, whatever, right. They own it. It's not like in the old days where you go to buy a record album. That's your album. You actually own that album, and you can listen to it as much as you want, play it for anybody you want, even make a cassette tape and give it to friends. And which was really a way a lot of us learned a new band or whatever, because somebody made a tape and we heard it, and that band actually then made more money as a result of that sharing, which is what it was. It was sharing. Right. It wasn't seen as something evil that you're taking money away from me by making that cassette tape. But just talk about a little bit about that, just the actual ownership of what do we actually, we're at the, we all know when we stop and think about it that we don't really own our homes, or if you're still paying car payment, you don't own your car. We talk about that's my car, or that's my home, or that's my book, that's my tune I'm listening to, but yeah, it's not our.
Everything's on lease now.
Lease,
except
right?
you know what's not on lease is our personal data. Right now, we're not leasing our personal data, we're handing it over. And to me, that's actually the craziest part, is that Facebook owns our personal data, Google owns our personal data, all these third-party trackers out there own our personal data, and because they own our personal data, they can just hand it over to the government through something called the third-party doctrine. It's very easy, it's much easier than the government going directly through us, which is why the NSA has, this whole scandal sort of blown up, is a direct byproduct of that. And it's something that the government had been after for a very long time. And these companies came in and they just made it much easier.
And why is that? When that was revealed a few months ago, that Apple and Microsoft and all these companies were already in cahoots with the federal government, turning over all this private information about ourselves to them and giving them whenever they wanted something. It's just so. Yet there was no real outcry about this. And maybe I'm just like one of these baby boomers who just talks too much about the 60s, but I really can't imagine in those days if it came out that the Grateful Dead was secretly giving information on everybody who went to their concerts to the federal government. What would happen to the Grateful Dead in terms of the fans? Goodbye.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Good. Right? It would be so shocking. And they would lose their fan base like that. Not so this. This was the most incredible revelation a few months ago. And it's just like, oh, yeah, well, I'm not breaking any laws. I don't care. They can have whatever they want.
Yeah, that's a very common cry, right? Is I'm not doing anything wrong, so why does it matter? And this is why it matters. Slavco's why it matters. You see time and time again, journalists, filmmakers. These are the people who are experiencing the real capabilities of these surveillance systems. They're not very good at stopping terrorism. They're terrible at context. That's why every time you go through an airport, you get harassed right now. I show a case after case in my film where it's writers, just someone making a bad joke on Twitter, and their lives are completely upended because these systems are crappy at context, and the government doesn't have a sense of humor.
You'll especially understand that when you see Slavco's film. Well, that's just I'm
But yeah, I mean, we could get into the PRISM stuff. I mean, if you, what I think is crazy too, though, is that it really should come down to trust. Like, we should be able to step back and say, oh man, well, I don't trust Google, now I'm going to go somewhere else. But where else are you going to go? I mean, in many ways, these services have become kind of public utilities, and we've been trapped. I mean, it goes back to the idea of them owning our data. We can't get it from them. Maybe if we could get it from them, if we had control over it, if we said, hey, you know, that's us in ones and zeros, and we should put it on. We could lease it if we wanted to, but we should be able to get it back in the same way that, you know, Amazon leases its books now. You know, that would at least restore some ownership and give us some control. But that's part of the problem. I think there's this sense of impotence. Like, what do we do? So what? They're handing this information over. You know, how do we stop it? It seems like this incredible effort to be able to repeal the Patriot Act and, you know, get rid of FISA courts and all this other stuff. There are sort of 10 bills floating around right now, but, you know, making that happen is going to be, it's going to require a lot more awareness. And I think that that's the biggest problem we're facing as a country right now, is this stuff is super complicated. It's designed to be complicated, and it's designed to be invisible. And those two things have allowed, have basically given warrant to the government to access this stuff and to continue, you know, the status quo, and to make us feel like we don't have power. And the first step is just awareness, but I think there is potential for us to make some real change in the coming months. If you see public opinion is really moving in the direction right now of saying, you know, the government has gone too far. It's about 50%. We're at a tipping point. Of course, you know, we're going to talk about this soon. Is the money has such power in politics, of course, but these guys want to keep their jobs too. So how do they keep their jobs? Well, we got to keep voting for them. So it's going to come down to money versus the constituency. So we'll see in the months ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for making this film and informing people of these things that we don't know. Tia and Carl made this incredible film that you're going to see here this week. And it sold out very quickly, and we added a third screening of it called Citizen Coke. And it starts with the essentially wanting to take a look at what does the Citizens United decision really mean in terms of corporations now can spend whatever they want on elections. And they decide to, in order to show the story, go to Wisconsin and follow the recall efforts of the Republican governor there, Scott Walker, and what the people of Wisconsin were up against in terms of the money that was flowing in, first to get Walker elected and then to keep him in office. And they specifically in the film follow, I think, 4 people who I would say are Republicans or who voted Republican in the past, and who become increasingly aware that which they have supported is essentially becoming their undoing as citizens in a democracy. So talk a little bit about that in terms of maybe first why you decided to make this film, and then some of the things you began to discover, the frightening things about, because when I saw the film, it's just this, like, oh, you just leave this film like, oh, you know, we have got to get it together here, because this is the big enchilada. The fact that the money now, and there's so much of it, because you know, how do we get this back? So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you so much for having us here. We're so excited to be back in Traverse City, and we can't wait to screen our film, see the reaction. You know, we started making the film in 2010 after Citizens United. Carl became addicted to watching Glenn Beck. I mean, it was, no.
My
like,
reputation's shot now. Fox News, Glenn Beck.
No, you guys are laughing,
you.
but like, literally, like, I'm watching him in the living room sinking lower and lower and lower into the chair. And I mean, it would like, and our TiVo was filling up. I couldn't watch Nurse Jack, like, I couldn't watch my shows. We just had like, I dumped Glenn Beck, just put it on tape, you know, and once we got it on tape, we're like, well, what do we do with it now? You know, and we thought, well, we gotta make a film about this. And the original title of the film was, Who the Fuck is Glenn Beck, I think?
That's where we started, yeah.
Then we got, But then, we were interested in understanding, the Tea Party, that he was rallying. And very shortly, found a path right to the people that were essentially bankrolling the Tea Party, the brothers Koch, Charles and David Koch, who now we know, through Americans for Prosperity, their political organizing arm, funded and seeded a lot of the Tea Parties around the country. So that was the genesis of this film. Carl?
I mean, what occurs to me is listening to Colin speak is none of this happened as fine print. I mean, it happened right in front of our eyes. There was a strategy by people who tended to be on sort of the fringes to the far right of the Republican Party, who came up with a way to super-enfranchise the wealthiest Americans and ensure that there would be a certain class of people pulling the strings in Washington, and then also sort of simultaneously figure out ways to disenfranchise people of average means and working people. And so in our film, we look at the Citizens United decision as this means of empowering the wealthy, and then a lot of these ALEC bills, which get pushed through at the state level, that take away the rights of people at the state level. So what T and I discovered as we were doing this is nobody really knew what Citizens United was going to really do. In 2010, it passed the ruling came down in January 2010, and midterm elections, we all know what happened there. I don't know how many people, what was it, 87 Tea Party members of Congress came in, and things shifted dramatically. But it was hard to tell how much of that really happened because of Citizens United. And we suspected that we really needed to look at what was happening at the state level, because Citizens United is assumed to be a decision that just deals with federal elections. But that's not the case. And we followed a hunch, and I think we were right. We took a risk. We invested in our time in doing a film about Wisconsin when everybody around us was saying this doesn't have anything to do with Citizens United. But we thought that was bullshit. And sure enough, in July of the following year, or July of 2012, the Supreme Court essentially extended the ruling formally to all 50 states. So it happened right in front of our eyes. It wasn't click a box that you don't read the fine print, We had a Supreme Court who issued it in writing, and it was widely reported, and we willingly are giving up some of our basic democratic rights.
Now, I'm so glad, too, that you made that decision to focus on that this is happening in states, because in the Midwest, these are essentially blue states that voted for Obama, voted Democratic, and yet our state houses and our state legislatures are all Republican. We have Republican governors when we're not a Republican state. We have Republicans control our House in Michigan. They control our Senate. The Republicans are a minority in the state of Michigan, and yet they run the whole show.
Well,
and how does, I mean, this is
and
just...
these are extremists. I mean, these are not just, run-of-the-mill Republicans. These are, in some cases, extremists who are trying to wipe out, collective bargaining and unions and voting rights and all sorts of things that, are part of our democratic legacy here. And so, yeah, I mean, in 2010, the Koch brothers, funded the Republican Governors Association, a third party, because they can't write checks directly to the candidates exceeding a certain amount. And then that association, seeded the Ohio race, the Maine race, all throughout the country. We had, Florida, Rick Scott, governors like Scott Walker with the same playbook trying to eliminate these freedoms. And what we found out was Citizens United, had a history long before this Supreme Court ruling. We came across footage of a commercial that they had funded and a campaign that they put together to support Clarence Thomas in his confirmation bid in 1991. So the same Supreme Court justice who rules on their case was actually enabled by Citizens United. They were also the founder was the guy who put together the Willie Horton commercial. Long history of extremist work. Anyhow, we made this film. We go to tea parties. We take you to the Koch retreats. We take you to what's happening in Wisconsin, and we see some extraordinary things. I think the thing that struck us the most about what was happening on the ground in Wisconsin was the outrage was not just your usual suspects. I mean, they were not, they were the Republicans in the heartland who felt betrayed by what was happening in their state. So we are really proud of the film we made, and we think it explains a lot about how money impacts politics, impacts electoral politics. Whether the candidates win or lose, this money is changing the discourse. It's creating the terms of the debate and how we talk about issues because of the commercials and the advertisements. But then, so we got a public broadcast commission for this film in spring of 2012. We were very excited. We thought there's no better place to show this film than on public airwaves and the largest TV audience in the country. But a funny thing happened on the way to Sundance. We started getting a bunch of frantic phone calls from the broadcaster that commissioned our film. They wanted us to take the word Coke out of the title of the film. They wanted us to de-emphasize David and Charles Koch in the storyline. They want us to take Sarah Palin out of the film. We're scratching our heads saying, well, what's going on here? I mean, what's up? And I think it took us like one Google search to realize that David Koch was not only on the board of WGBH in Boston, the PBS affiliate that produces Frontline and all sorts of other
science programs. Yeah.
Nova. He was on the board of trustees of WNET. And he was also a major donor. WNET is our New York affiliate. And those two affiliates produce the most PBS programming of any affiliates around the country. A few months ago, after negotiations broke down, public television just entirely pulled the funding. They pulled $150,000 of funding, and they pulled our opportunity for a public broadcast of our film. Jane Mayer, investigative reporter from The New Yorker, found out why. She went far beyond a Google search, and she talked to a whole cast of characters, and what she discovered was that the president of WNET, Neil Shapiro, was anticipating a 7-figure donation from David Koch. And because of that, he put an enormous amount of pressure on the independent television service, the little agency that funds independent documentaries. And as a result of that, they pulled the funding for our film. So our film about money and democracy was basically censored, because of money in public media. Carl.
And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but just tell them that so you've made a decision and you went on Kickstarter here earlier this month. I think you're in your final week of an appeal to the public of let's not let this happen. We're going to get this film in theaters. We're going to get this film on television somehow. And
yeah, I mean, no, it was outrageous. Look, we didn't change the title of the film. We didn't de-emphasize the Kochs in the film. We thought it was absolutely, a demeaning request and an inappropriate request. We kept the film as we made it. We're really proud of the film. And we're turning to small donors around the country through Kickstarter to help us replace that $150,000 that we lost because of David Koch's influence. Thank you. We need your help, actually. We need your help. We're actually just a few $1,000s away right now from making up the entire $150,000 that public television pulled. And so if you guys have any time today, you can help us get over that get over the top of that. Any funds that we raise now are going to go towards making sure that this film gets launched and gets seen far and wide. We're going to try to show it in 50 state legislatures around the country. We're doing a Capitol Hill screening in the fall. We have all sorts of cool and creative plans for the film, but we can't do it without money. So that's where you guys come in.
It was amazing the first 3 days of your Kickstarter campaign. Half the money, $75,000, came in just in less than 3 days. People do not want to hear that they can't see something, and that's inspiring to think that people are still willing to fight back. But I have to tell you, what happened to them goes on a lot more. We don't hear about it. We don't hear about it because 99% of filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers who are usually fairly poor, when faced with that kind of situation, are going to go along with the censorship, because otherwise you're not going to have a career. And the risk that they've taken in doing this is that, well, I don't think they'll be getting any money from PBS anytime soon. And then other entities become nervous, like, do business with them, it could cause us trouble. And so by refusing to censor themselves and then going public and telling us about it, it's a very brave and risky thing to do. And I'm telling you, practically nobody else that I know would do it, and I've seen dozens of people cave over the years. And so I'm personally very proud of you. And I just also want to point out that we have a connection to the Citizens United decision, because we made Fahrenheit 9/11. Citizens United, the case was, Citizens United made a long-form campaign commercial against Hillary Clinton when she was going to run. And the Federal Elections Commission declared that it was an ad, and they got to do all the reporting and all this. And they said, no, it's a documentary, just like Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. And our name was invoked in front of the Supreme Court as an example. They should be able to show their film if we got to do ours. And they used essentially that as an example of justifying, because somehow, but of course we weren't funded by anybody other than just essentially a Hollywood studio who wanted to make money putting a film out there. But it was a little stinging just to hear us being referenced as in the same ballpark as these people.
Yeah. Well, and let me just add that Michael has some experience also with people trying to stop his film. And mentioning Fahrenheit 9/11, it wasn't public funding, but we had a front row seat to what it looks like when suddenly it looks like your film isn't going to go out. When Disney jumped in and said, "We're not going to distribute this film," and
they owned it.
And they owned it. So I mean, what was that like for you to know, just in an instant, that this this labor of love may never be seen?
It was a sinking feeling, and it occurred on the night of my 50th birthday. And we got wind of it through a very strange circumstance. You remember what happened there with the Disney executive was at a restaurant in New York for dinner that night, and he had just seen the version we showed him, and he was telling a friend that he was going back to recommend to Michael Eisner to kill the film and not release it. And because Disney owned Miramax, that's why Miramax was making the film. And it just so happened that the owner of the restaurant was very close friends with one of our producers. He happened just walking by the table and heard this. And he calls up our producer. He goes, "You're not going to believe what I just heard. There's apparently this guy from Disney saying that they're going to kill the film." So he calls, it's like midnight at this point, he calls me and I'm like, oh my God. But we had the weekend to sort of plot what we're going to do here. And we decided to go public with it. And it went on the front page of the New York Times, and we went right after Disney. And everybody who did this, including my agent, who allowed himself to be quoted by name on the front page of the Times, saying that Eisner told him that one of the reasons they can't release this film is because they've applied for these huge tax breaks in Orlando for Disney World. Jeb Bush is the governor, and we're not going to release a film attacking his brother when we need these millions and millions of dollars of tax breaks. And so it made it into the New York Times, and we knew that there's only 6 studios in Hollywood. And we just burned a bridge with one of them. You can't burn too many of those bridges, or you won't get funding for your films. But you know that when you do it, and you just hope for the best.
But like if you can't have integrity as a documentary filmmaker, like what else do we have? I mean, we learned, by example, watching Michael work in integrity, in every film that he's made. resisting these forces, whether it's commercial, forces, political forces that are trying to do you in. And you've stood up, with pride and integrity and fought back. And you've given us a sense of, how this gets done. And look, we're so grateful for your support, Markle, and we also know that when you do the right thing, other people have your back. And that's what we found out with Kickstarter. Oh.
And I hope that's what's happening and what's going to happen with your great film, and what happened with us with Fahrenheit will give other documentary filmmakers a little bit of courage to realize that actually, if you do stand up, you're gonna end up with thousands of people around the country sending you donations, complete strangers, so that your film gets out there. Or in our case with Fahrenheit, by taking that risk and doing what people advise us not to do, was to go public against Michael Eisner and Disney, and it becomes the largest grossing documentary of all time. I hope that is enough of no, it's not the end of your career and you're going to be broke forever and whatever. It's but you have to stay true to yourself. Okay, I think I was telling them I got here a few minutes late because I was doing an interview on the Bradley Manning thing that's going to be happening, and yesterday he was found not guilty for quote aiding the enemy, which was the worst charge, which I found it's just an odd term, because who he was aiding was us, the American people, by telling us what our government was up to, but I guess we're the enemy. And what is the mentality, whether it's with an Amazon or a Google, or whether it's the Koch brothers, or Neil Shapiro and WNET? Neil Shapiro, by the way, I just thought of this. Wasn't he the head of NBC News when the war started? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
And
he's
didn't
the guy
he kill
who,
Phil Donahue's show off MSNBC?
And he scrubbed the network news of all offensive images of the war. That was his. That's his legacy at NBC News.
Right, and the guy is still there and still doing things like what he's done to your film. I mean, I think we all kind of know what the problem is here. I think we all kind of sort of feel that we're against the ropes here. I'm just open this up to anybody. What is it we can do? Because people, Colin, especially what you were saying, we feel powerless when you're held there in no man's land. The sense of powerlessness is overwhelming, and yet you think, well, wait a minute, we're the people, we're the majority. The billionaires are not the majority of this country. We're the majority. So how? But I think people just have this sense, and now young kids are getting it. None of us, those of us my age, we didn't graduate with college debt. They're slaves at 22 years old. I mean, they're completely chained down because of this debt. And I just think there's all these elements go into the sense that we're no longer in control of our own lives. Yeah, we'll go to questions in a second, yeah.
I mean, I really believe in the power of the documentary. I mean, I grew up watching your films, and, I saw the profound impact that they could have. I remember sitting at a rally and hearing Al Gore, this is before he had made An Inconvenient Truth. He said there was someone who raised their hand in the back of the audience, and they asked, well, if I can get 30 million people to vote for you in this next election, would you run again? And he sat on stage for a really long time. And then he said, no. He said, I have more power as a private citizen than I'd ever have as President of the United States. And then he made An Inconvenient Truth. And these are the things that really hung with me, and that's why what you guys have done is so vital, and I think we see people clamoring and reaching for these things, and because the power of the doc is really transformative, and it's a way of undermining these systems, because I think that truth does win in the long run, and it's just a matter of seeking it. So I think that's a big way of building awareness. But the problem then is, how do you transform awareness into action? And that's the challenge, right? Is how do you suddenly motivate and get people off their asses, because it's really tough. Incomes are down, like people just don't have the time or energy, and how do you motivate people to say this thing matters enough for you to divert what little time you have towards, say, data privacy? So, you know, and what we're doing with our film, we've worked with some amazing groups right now. We've got something called trackoff.us. This is our new website, and the first step is just getting as many people on Capitol Hill to see the film as possible, because I really don't think that congressmen understand how these systems work. I mean, look, if the head of the CIA can get ousted because he doesn't know how Gmail works, what chance do the rest of us have? So, like, that's step one. But step two, I really believe in armchair activism. We've seen it work. I mean, it stopped CISPA. You know, getting millions of people to sit back online and petition, it works. And while these tools online have some problems, they also have some incredible strengths in terms of building coalitions of people. And that there is a real power there. The problem is the surveillance that is also going on top of that. And so this speaks to really what you were talking about before, Michael, which is the idea of transparency. And this is the problem with Bradley Manning, is that here is someone who is coming out and trying to bring some transparency to our government, saying, look, we need someone watching the watchers, and the government goes, no, we don't. And it's this exact same mentality, though, in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, every CEO will come out swinging, saying, you know what, privacy is dead. We need to be as transparent as possible. On Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook page, he said, you know, we want to make the world more open and connected. But it's a one-way street. They want us to be as transparent as possible. They don't want to be transparent at all. Facebook has an email address you can send your requests to. They don't even have a phone number you can call if you want to talk to someone about anything there. I went into their office 3 or 4 times trying to talk to anybody. They gave me the email address. They said, send us an email. I'm like, there's got to be someone here I can talk to. You know, so it was just this iron curtain. And that's the mentality in Silicon Valley. Same thing with Google. You know, Eric Schmidt came out really pissed off that CNET published a picture of his house. What did Google do to all of our houses? Right? So it's just mind-blowing, these guys. I mean, and that's why I took a page from Michael here, and I went to Mark Zuckerberg's house, because that was the only way I could get a hold of someone at Facebook. You know, and I wore some spy glasses, and I went up with cameras, and I asked him, you know, hey, man, I'd like to get an interview with you. And he told me to shut the cameras off. And I was like, all right, I guess privacy matters to you too. So and that's the reality here, is just trying to reveal the hypocrisy of these systems, because these tech companies are working in hand with the government. They're not making money, but they are both getting an incredible amount. The companies are getting billions of dollars off of our data, and you know, the government is getting exactly what they've wanted for a long time, which is unprecedented access to everything that we do. And that is the nature of this relationship right now, and it was born out of 9/11.
Anybody else want to jump in on this, Slavco, or you guys?
Yeah, we're having it's for the last few years we watched, you know, with your Patriot Act from a distance, thinking, my God, you know, this is a terrible thing, and the repercussions for all of you, this is just dire. And really stressful for the rest of us, because regardless of what you think the rest of the world thinks about you, we actually still look at America as this great thing that could be, and hold itself to remarkably high standards, and we kind of, it sounds sentimental, a bit sappy, but we really, really hope that you stand up and resist and be all that you promise to be, because people really do look up to America, you know, in a big way. So it's kind of really, really hurtful and awful and dangerous and scary when you have the Patriot Act come in and so much power gets taken away from you and your democracies are eroded. It stresses the rest of us out. Well, in a trickle-down effect, if you like, quite literally, as sure as I'm sitting here, our government is putting through legislation for the GCSB, which is one of our spy agencies, to allow it to spy on its own citizens. And there was some marches just literally 2 days before I left. People were out marching, and it's so hard to watch because there's not enough people marching, and no one's listening. And the government comes out, and they just have to say one thing on TV: if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. And I'm watching the TV going, come on, please don't anyone fall for this old line of bullshit. And but it just works. And what do you do? I mean, I tell as many people as I can, you can't be serious. This can't really be happening. Do you understand what this means? I mean, morally, you know, and New Zealand's a very proud democratic country too. But we're going through it, and they chose to put the law through while the royal baby was out, and everyone's just drama. What's the name going to be? Oh, this is the most exciting thing ever. It's not exciting at all. Who cares? We live on the other side of the world, and through it goes. And I couldn't help but thinking, gosh, this looks awfully familiar when we look over at America, and here we are down in New Zealand facing the same thing. And it'll just keep happening, because if the government learns it can get away with it in little increments, right? And I think all Americans have learned this now. Yeah, if they just take it in small parts, if they try and take away your rights and you allow it, and it just keeps happening in small increments. And what next? Where does that end up? In that direction. But yeah, I mean, how do you resist? How do you counter it? What's the next step, you know?
You know, and the irony is that, you know, our lives are transparent now, right? I mean, we have no privacy, but as we learned following Citizens United, the corporations operate completely in the dark. You know, we can't tell how much money corporate America is funneling into our political system because they use these shill groups. You know, they operate, you know, absolutely, even though Citizens United said we believe in disclosure, the ruling said disclosure is important, they're using all sorts of third parties to get their money into our elections, and we can't find out who. We can't find out exactly how much money the Kochs are funding any particular candidate or political party. We know by their own admission that they raised $400 million in the last election, but we don't know how much more, and we don't know where it goes.
Right. And so now there's a menu. If you don't mind having your name out there, you can give to a super PAC as an individual or corporation. Corporations don't do it because they don't give to super PACs because that's disclosed. So you want to go under the radar, you go to Karl Rove's nonprofit version with the same name as the super PAC, and that does not get disclosed.
You know, when somebody says to me, I've got nothing to hide, I don't care if they have my whatever. And I say to them, do you have curtains on your bedroom window? Go, well, of course. No, actually, they're blinds. Oh, okay. Why do you close them? Because you're not doing anything illegal in there, are you? No. Well, then why don't we have a right to see what's going on in there? Why you put those up for a reason, even though you're not doing anything wrong in there. They're up there. They're up there for a reason. But of course, what we're talking about here isn't that. That's a very stark example of, well, yes, I want my privacy. Let's open it up to, yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a generational difference, too. We've seen it with our Kickstarter campaign. My mother's friends will not give us money through Kickstarter. You know, people over a certain age are writing us checks and sending it through the mail because they do not want their information on that system. And I don't know what that happens to that information. But, you know, younger people don't seem to care. That doesn't mean you all shouldn't go onto Kickstarter and give us money. But we have seen a difference in the way that young people respond to those kinds of online crowdfunding operations.
Well, what we found for sure, because we've been doing a lot of research into the generational gaps and what, say, you know, someone who's 16 really cares about, and what someone who's 16 really does care about is the government snooping on them. They don't mind so much the corporation doing it, but also there's this dissonance because they don't see the relationship necessarily between, you know, the corporate monitoring and the government monitoring. Which I want to bring up a point because it ties to what you were saying earlier, which is I was speaking with somebody who was an employee at Google who had grown up in China. And he had gone to school there, and he was talking about their version of Twitter, which is called Weibo. And he was saying, if you're in China, as you're typing into Weibo, it will censor you in real time. It lets you know this is something you can't send, it warns you. And he said, wow, I didn't realize that, I'd always thought of America as being, the sort of the beacon of freedom in this regard. And he went, wow, in ways, America's a lot worse. And I was like, well, yeah, it's interesting, because if you think about it, if you know that you're being censored in real time, you understand that the government's watching you. But here, we just use these systems willy-nilly because you can't feel it in real time, because you can't feel the censorship happening, or because you can't feel the surveillance. You don't necessarily know that it's happening. It's a much more devious and much more clever trick. I like to say the greatest trick the NSA ever played was convincing the world it didn't exist. And it's been quite effective for some time. And I think, like you guys were saying, like the hardest part with censorship, in many instances, is you don't even know what's going on. Like we have a couple, it's great that you were able to figure out how it happened, like what the source was, why it was coming down. Same with you, Michael. But a lot of times you don't know you're being censored. You don't know you're not getting into some film festival because somebody has bucks at the top and is a sponsor. Like a lot of times censorship happens in the dark.
All right, let's open it up. And sir, we'll start with you right here. By the way, this panel will be on local television and on public radio, so just
Thanks.
be very
Washington,
careful what
can
you
you hear
say.
me? I have a question for Colin Hoback, and that's, to what extent do you shine the spotlight equally on the entertainment industry and its role in some of these things? For example, going to Michael Moore's comment that we don't have property any longer, things are leased. If you listen to Cory Doctorow's comments, that's true of our own computers at home. Because we don't control our computers, because other people put things on our computers that we don't know about, that restrict our computers from obeying our own instructions. And the biggest case of that was when Sony BMG, the record label, put onto people's computers without their knowledge rootkits to monitor their usage to guard against copyright infringement. And we have Homeland Security being one of the greatest enforcers of the copyright laws now. We have a government surveillance from the United States of Kim.com living in New Zealand, the owner of Mega Upload, who got sued in one civil copyright case in the US and showed up and defended the case. But no motion picture studio or record label sued his company in the United States. But there was an Osama bin Laden raid on his compound in New Zealand after this US government surveillance. And now the United States government is negotiating intellectual property protections in trade agreements that are being kept secret from the American people because they don't want the American people to know what the proposed changes in copyright law are, while certain people in Hollywood have access to the text that even members of Congress have not had. What do you say about the entertainment industry's implications in the issues that you've all been discussing?
I don't go into that. It's a lot of great points there. I don't go into that in the film simply because there wasn't time and because I needed to focus on what I thought was the biggest issue we're facing to civil liberties right now, which is the utter loss of privacy. But it's tied into that, of course, right? Because the entertainment industry is able to use these surveillance systems and use digital measures in order to control, in order to make sure that their profit margin is what they want it to look like. So, the problem is if you look at any of these systems, you have to ask who has what to gain. So of course the entertainment industry has some to gain. I don't deal with them as much because I'm focusing more on the entities that we've considered to be benign for a long time, the tech companies. But it's something actually I've been considering exploring for another project, so yeah.
I'm so glad you raised that. Do most people know about Kim.com here?
No.
Oh gosh, gee, I'd love to get my hands on that for a film. He's, yeah, well no, let's have a chat, seriously, because what's going on there, like for the world, as a case study is something else, but he's notoriously, he has his own camera crew following him. He's, but keeps very much to himself, but he's sitting on the juiciest story of all time today, just sitting there. I have to find a way to get into that. That sounded a bit opportunistic.
Would you but give people the 30-second explanation of what we're talking
Kim.com is a German national who's living in New Zealand, and he has residency, which means he has rights as a resident there.
about? This isn't a website, Kim.com.
Yeah, like Mega Upload was one of the world's biggest, places where people come in and they can share files and,
Right.
and all their stuff. And so the FBI decided they were going to go in and raid his mansion. We're talking, and there's footage of it, helicopters landing there out with their guns, and they're flying into his compound, crazy stuff. I mean, the fact that our government said, sure, you want to fly over to New Zealand and swoop in helicopters on one of our residents and take all their stuff, and they did. They went into their house, they took files, computers, everything.
You mean Americans did the raid?
They came into our country with a... You have to understand, at the moment, the reason these bills are going through from our government, a conservative government, he's John Key, don't get me started. So you have to think about it. The Americans wanted to make an example to the rest of the world, and on behalf of big studios, there are people like him, all the file sharing, this sort of thing, who are doing this. Yeah, we're going to make an example of him, and we're going to go into New Zealand. Okay, this is our own state, off on the other side of the world, flying in our helicopters, all on camera. And we're going to go in and we're just going to take everything. And they did. And all the stuff that's going on at the moment is that all the case is undone because the GCSB, which is our international spying agency, unlike our Secret Service, they got one thing wrong. They were that inept that you can't do that to a resident in New Zealand. You could only do it to a citizen. So at the most fundamental level of spying, did they fuck up? And the FBI are furious because they're one shot at going, we can do this, and we'll get you. They actually have to sit there and go, damn it, you screwed up. And it was on the front cover of Wired, the whole story, big thing. And because of that, our government is now using that as an excuse to go, well, clearly, the GCSB needs to be tidied up and we need to change those laws so that can't happen again, and have completely used that as a way of taking away, all of our rights. And so it's just huge, all because of him. And he was out in the street the other day as part of the demonstrations while his court case started, because the Americans and New Zealand government are colluding to not even give him his files so he can see what they have on him in order to defend himself. Because America is trying to extradite him right now. That's what the court case is happening right now. They're trying to get him over here. And,
Wow.
Yeah, so.
There's a question right over here.
Right over there in the aisle, yes.
Hi. A side note, my cousin Heidi raised several of her last $1,000 for distribution just with posts on Facebook for Ditropia, so that was very cool to watch. But I'm particularly depressed, demoralized since Obama's election. I was actually galvanized by Bush, and since Obama's election, I've watched it get worse. My problem is that I have several initials after my name, and none of them are PhD. They're more like OCD and I can't focus. There's too much that's wrong. The Civil Rights Act, the abortion onslaught, the Guantanamo, and Guantanamo, that's my point here. When somebody says, I'm not worried, I'm not doing anything wrong, there are several people in Guantanamo that didn't do anything wrong. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they've been there for 11 years without even being charged. And I don't know why this isn't a bigger deal to people, except that it hasn't happened to them or to somebody that they know. So what I'm afraid of is that we're actually going to have to see a far more sweeping totalitarianism take place so that we're all each individually touched in some way. It's like once you know a gay person, you're okay with being gay. That's going to have to be the case because there are American citizens being targeted by drones. American citizens thrown into jail without charges for months and even years. And sorry, it's very upsetting. I was at one point on a trajectory of getting to some place where I could do something. I had a pretty substantial blog, and I was censored out of it. I was shut down, bit by bit by bit, and by my fellow liberals, who somehow, once Obama became president, everything that Bush was doing, that they were out in the streets screaming about, they twisted themselves into pretzels trying to make it okay that Obama is doing it. And I don't know how to combat my own side when it's your own side doing it.
Well, that's an excellent point. How do you guys feel about, I mean, do you think that things are worse under Obama, especially in relationship to this issue, than it was under Bush? Is anybody willing to say that out loud, or? I'll say it.
I mean, he's expanded the systems in ways. You know, he came into office. I used to think I justified it in his first term. I sat back and said, oh, well, you know what? You had the right, you know, attacking him, saying, you know, if you look back on the ads that were going up against him, they were all saying, you know, there's going to be a terrorist attack within the first year. So you can imagine him getting to office. Maybe he wants to hold on to the healthcare plan. So in exchange for that, he's like, well, I'm just going to keep all of these surveillance systems in place so that no one can say that I didn't, you know, do everything in my power to prevent a terrorist attack. But he's in his second term now. And these systems have only expanded. And he's sitting around justifying them. He's fine sitting in office in control of these powers because he's the one in control. He trusts himself with them. But of course, it's not just Obama. I mean, it's, you know, he's a figurehead in many respects, but he could be more of a leader. And I think we've all been really disappointed with the outcome. And it just feels like you're choosing like from the same side, right? Like I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I can't align with anything anymore.
Well, I mean, we were censored by public broadcast, the liberal public television, right? Because they're so afraid of being defunded. I mean, how much more could they be defunded? The extremists they're only getting 15% of their budget from our tax dollars. They're making the rest of it up with corporate funding. So they're so worried about placating, you know, their patrons that they want to actually go against their very mission, which is to air films just like ours. So yeah, I mean, we were pretty stunned that this attack, you know, through the influence of Koch money was coming via, you know, viewers like you, or the station that's supposed to serve viewers like you. And I think the only way that we can stop this is by making it known that this is unacceptable.
Yes, who's next? In the last row there, yes.
Yeah, question for Slavco. I was curious as to your take on the Dennis Rodman visit fiasco to North Korea, and whether you thought something else was going on there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think literally a week after that happened, I got an interview from Vice, who are the company that went ahead and did that with him and made it happen. And apparently they were very, very surprised that it unfolded the way they did. I don't know what they were expecting from that. Vice so far has gone in and done a few films in North Korea in a very sort of, wow, look how crazy this place is kind of way. I don't think they looked into things as much as they could have, or pushed the envelope. I don't know what the expectation was there. I don't know if, what was it, basketball diplomacy, which they were going for as a good start for opening dialogue. Was that the intent? I don't know.
It's a show on HBO here, and it's mainly an entertainment show. It's done for entertainment.
Yes,
but it's done, but also but they use nonfiction to.
Okay.
And it's just funny to see Dennis Rodman there playing basketball.
Sure, and then, but that's it, without going, this means, or it's an opportunity to go further and explore something else.
You're asking us to go 2 or 3 layers deeper than that.
Okay, that would, no. Okay. Yeah, no, I saw it happen, and I heard
Not when
all
we're running
about
the
it.
world. Don't expect so much of us. We're busy, you know.
Yeah, no, it's enough. I thought, on one level, I saw the interview and I thought, well, because there are a number of films I'm doing, and one of them is going much further into North Korea, taking it into much deeper levels, and I thought with that, it's kind of opening that door in a strange way to see their leadership soften like that. It simply doesn't happen. So even if that's what it took, and there wasn't much more to it, it was really, really significant because it opens a door and lets a little light in of possibility, you know. And I just think that door needs to be sort of pushed open a little bit more and some more questions asked.
In our final minutes here, we're trying to get a few more questions in, so if
In
you
the
keep it brief, and we'll keep our answers brief.
In the back to your left?
Yes, quickly, yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to know from any of you, how can we keep ourselves off the grid with the cloud, with, you know, there's the cloud, there's Facebook. Do you all do anything special?
I'm freaking out to know that Google owns our Google Docs. Is that what I understood before? I mean, I'm not doing anything. Clearly, I need to see your movie.
No, that's all. I mean, they do. They don't have, you know, unique ownership over it, but I mean, theoretically, they grant themselves that right. Yeah. Same with LinkedIn. Same with most of these
Do
things.
they have access to our Gmail?
Does Google have access to our Gmail?
Can they actually go? Can they actually go in and read our emails?
I mean, of course they have access to them. But getting off the grid's not possible. It's not possible.
I
Turned on
agree.
my computer this morning. I got an email from MoveOn.org, originated from David Simon. David Simon has started as a Philadelphia reporter and went on to do The Wire and Tourmay HBO things. The Koch brothers are attempting to buy the Tribune newspapers. He needs some public outcry to help him make that not happen. And that's
right.
my comment.
And the Tribune, we're talking about the Los Angeles Times, the Baltimore Sun, the Chicago Tribune, the Orlando Sentinel. I mean, these are very significant newspapers that would give, you know, the Kochs and their radical extremist politics, you know, a way right into our breakfast tables every morning.
Next. Where's the microphone?
Over here.
Yep.
Hello. Oh, hello. First of all, thank you for being here and answering questions. Do you all ever listen to a guy named Dave Emery? Ever heard of him? No? He's a researcher of fascism, and he has an anti-fascist standpoint and has a radio show. He's been doing it for about 25 years or so. But I just wanted to ask about that first. But really my main question is, we saw the George Zimmerman trial televised like hell the past few weeks, but they did not televise the Bradley Manning trial whatsoever. What do you think about that?
It's appalling.
Okay.
I mean, it's perverse, but it's also very much in keeping with distraction techniques. Let's focus on, you know, and be titillated by soap opera rather than something meaningful. I just think that's fairly typical, actually, now.
Well, it's happening also though with Edward Snowden. The conversation has moved to like, where in the world is Edward Snowden? You know, as opposed to what Edward Snowden actually was about.
And the media was very willing to jump to make that the story. Very happy to, because it's easy, right? It's Where's Waldo and.
I like Carmen Sandiego, but yeah.
Yeah, right. So, okay, yes, quickly. Yes, where are we at? I can't see. Yes.
Question. With Bradley Manning being convicted yesterday, do you feel that he was used as a tool and now, you know, other citizens, you know, are seeing what's happening? Do you feel any sense of responsibility of defending him? And we've, in a sense, gotten him out on a limb. And the same with Snowden. I mean, do they really realize, these citizens, that they're, you know, putting their life in danger? And does you know, do you, Michael, and other people that support what they're doing have any sense of responsibility? How do you feel about that?
Well, yes. I mean, I feel that sense of responsibility just as a citizen of this country. It should be enough. I'll say this: myself and some others have been discussing over the last few weeks of how to put the money together to get a private plane to get Ed Snowden out of there and to the country he wants to go to. And it's been difficult trying to figure out how to do that legally because we would be aiding and abetting someone who has been...
Maybe a super PAC?
We need to somehow hide how to do this. But I actually do feel, I don't know the guy, but I feel very responsible for trying to help him out of his situation. He did something really important for us and actually brought about a vote within a month or so in Congress that was so close last week, 217 to 205, to alert us or to stop this gathering all of our phone numbers and who we call and all that, casting a wide net when there's no suspicion of any crime. Man, that was powerful, and he deserves our thanks. And he and Bradley Manning are real patriots as far as I'm concerned. And again, in our time, those of us who are older, Daniel Ellsberg is a hero, right? He stole documents, and is still seen as a hero, and is a hero. But these two guys and the media are complicit with this in presenting how they tell the story. I just think it's despicable, and I think we all have a responsibility to stand with them. And I just feel very sorry for Bradley Manning and how many years they're going to put him in prison today. And it sure sends a message to everybody else. Don't you even think about doing anything like that. So. Quickly, we got time for two more. Yes. Huh?
Hi, thanks for being here. And I wanted to ask the panel to comment on two issues, one of which I think is the biggest problem that we're facing because of the erosion of our democracy, and that is climate change. I don't know if, I'm surprised to hear you say that Frontline has Koch influence, because Frontline did a show called Climate of Doubt, which talked about how, the issue and discussion of climate change was censored by the Koch brothers, pouring money into the campaigns of the opponents, people, for anyone who talked about it. And so I'd like to hear the panel comment on whether they think that that's an issue that is being censored, and also campaign finance reform, which I think is our biggest hope for changing this and reclaiming our democracy. Public financing of campaigns, or if what the panel thinks about whether that's a hopeful thing that as citizens we could pay attention to and try to move toward.
I'll just speak to the second part of your question. I mean, I think, look, if we think it's bad now, the Supreme Court's going to rule on another case that involves direct contributions to campaigns, and my suspicion is that they're going to take the lid off of that too. So we won't have these ruses of super PACs to worry about. These guys are just going to be able to funnel money directly to the candidates. I think that if public financing of elections weren't so dangerous, they wouldn't be going after that too. And what the same guys who brought you Citizens United have forced votes to try to eliminate the public financing of elections in Arizona, in Maine, all throughout the country, because they're afraid of, that's all our dollars, small dollar donors in masses can actually combat these billionaires. So I think it's very hopeful, the idea of public financing, but are the rest of us willing to check that box on the tax form?
Is there, sorry to ask, in America, is it a widely discussed thing, how much of a problem it is, the way people can pour in money and lobby the government during elections? Like there's definitely an end point where people are like, we can all see this is extremely destructive?
There was somewhat of a dialogue about that in the last month of the presidential election, but on election night, it evaporated, and the conventional wisdom has become, see, it didn't make a difference. Money
because Obama got reelected.
Because Obama got reelected, yeah. And, Tina and I talked to Michael shortly after that, and he just said, false positive.
Right. Right. And because you focus on our states, the state houses, they're the people who gerrymander these congressional districts. That's the most important thing. So we can't get these laws passed in Congress because these Republican legislatures, who are minorities in our Midwest, are I mean, what do we have in Michigan left here? I think there might be 4 Democrats in Congress, maybe 3, 5. How many districts do we have? 11 or 12? But my point is that the majority, we generally now vote for the Democrat for president, but the majority of our, you look at the map of congressional districts and it's virtually all red. I personally think we need a constitutional amendment that just outright bans private contributions to elections. They're publicly financed. That's how they do it in a number of countries, or even in Canada. I think I don't think you can give more than $200 to a candidate for parliament there. I mean, they have really strict laws in countries that don't allow.
Same in New Zealand.
What is it like there?
New Zealand is like public money. Everyone gets X amount to do advertising. Do your best with it. That's all you're getting.
Public money and public airtime, so that these, because a lot of the costs of these campaigns are the arms race of commercials. And who's benefiting the most from that? I mean, it's CBS, it's NBC, it's the very forces that we hope are going to actually bring some of this to light, but they're on the, they're on the dole. So, yeah, a lot of European countries, they limit the amount of time you can spend campaigning, not just 3 months, sometimes 3 weeks, and then they force you to, or they make sure that you have public monies for commercials.
Are you aware of that in other countries like the UK? It's 5 weeks. Campaign can't last more than 5 weeks, an election. I think in Canada it's 8 weeks. It's so much saner, but then so is providing health insurance for every person that you call a citizen of your country. We're out of time here, but this is such an important issue. Thank you for getting up this morning and discussing with us. Thank you, panel, for participating in this. Enjoy the festival.